Three well-known Pakistani diplomats who've served for extended periods in India came on Pakistani television openly advocating terrorism directed against India. This at a time when Pakistan's fate hangs on a Damocles sword, because you've got the Financial Action Task Force, which in a couple of months from now needs to be convinced that Pakistan has stopped backing terrorism emerging from its soil. In the midst of these former high commissioners to India telling Hamid Mir, the Pakistani journalist, that the Modi government's move calls for terrorism against India, everyone in India is saying, hey, we told you so. This is exactly what they've been doing. Now they've come on TV to accept that terrorism is what they really want to push.
Rattled, isolated and humiliated. This is the face of desperate Pakistan. Three former high commissioners openly calling for jihad in Kashmir. As global support grows for India on scrapping of Article 370, Pakistan has resorted to warmongering. And these former Pakistan ambassadors have joined the chorus. The three former high commissioners appeared on Pakistani journalist Hamid Mir's show. First to open fire was Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, Pakistan High Commissioner between 1997 and 2002. Was Abdul Basit, Pakistan High Commissioner between 2014 and 2017. Then came Shahid Malik, Pakistan High Commissioner between 2006 and 2012. This all-out call for jihad after Islamabad failed miserably to gain any global support on the Kashmir issue. Remember, on Friday, India successfully thwarted a move by Pakistan, which was backed by China at the UN Security Council. And despite Prime Minister Modi exposing Pakistan as a sponsor of terror with US President Donald Trump, Islamabad is yet to learn its lesson. Bureau Report, India Today.
These are the ambassadors of jihad. Some of the most respected diplomats Pakistan has had. They've been high commissioners to India at crucial times in the history of these two countries. So far they were seen as the voice of reason, as the voice of moderation, as the voice of the civilian face. But now the mask is coming off, advocating jihad. These are not Sayyid Salahuddin or Lashkar-e-Taiba chief Hafiz Saeed. These are the voices and faces of the Pakistani civilian establishment, now asking for an armed struggle, now advocating terrorism on Indian territory. Joining us on this broadcast, I want to welcome first one of the most respected voices in India, Pakistan, former High Commissioner to Pakistan, a man who knows these gentlemen personally, G. Parthasarathy. Welcome.
Thank you.
With us live from Islamabad this evening, we've got Abdul Basit, who everyone knew till recently as former High Commissioner to Pakistan. He served between March 2014 and July 2017, and each time, and I've interviewed him multiple times, each time I'd ask him about Sayyid Salahuddin or Hafiz Saeed, he said we have nothing to do with them, which wasn't true at that time either, but at least he was publicly trying to build a distance. Now he's speaking the same language. We're very disturbed and shocked by what he's done. We'll ask him about why. Also with us, Sushant Sareen, who never leaves an opportunity to call a spade senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Ambassador Parthasarathy, I start with you. These are gentlemen you've known. Going back 1997, Ashraf Jahangir Qazi to Mr. Basit.
Yes.
Now on Pakistani television, advocating armed struggle, inciting terrorism on Indian territory. This is not Hafiz Saeed, this is Abdul Basit.
No, both Abdul Basit and Ashraf very well. It is very unlike them or unlike what they had to say and do and how they dealt with business. But let me say, they are faced with a difficult situation now. The gambit was to take the Kashmir issue to the United Nations Security Council, and they ended up with 14 people, you know, virtually rejecting everything they said, and just one China struggling along. Therefore, that was, I think, to the diplomat, not to the military establishment, which does not, but certainly to the diplomatic establishment, a shock.
So you think they're making up for their failures through verbiage and through verbal posturing?
I really think that they are now going to, you know, find that the views that they have spoken about in India, you know, are now being rejected. So it affects them also personally. My own view is that, they're into a bind because if whatever they said about jihad is there, they are in violation of, I would love it, and every Indian would love it, because every time they talk jihad, we'll go to the Financial Action Task Force, and they're going to have a tougher time economically. And in their heart of hearts, they know that. And after what had happened in New York, where really, just China, and at the end of the day, the Chinese are singing a slightly different tune 3 days later, because after all, Xi Jinping is scheduled to come to India. This is disappointment, but I thought the use of terms like jihad surprised me for people I've known so well.
Let's get Abdul Basit in on this. You're looking at the response in India. As someone who's interviewed you, spoken to you, you always denied, at least publicly for whatever it was worth, any association with terrorists operating on Pakistani soil, saying, and as a diplomat, that you had no idea about it, that even if it were happening, it wasn't because the Pakistani army or government wanted it. Now you're calling for terrorist acts on Indian soil. This is the same language, High Commissioner, that Hafiz Saeed speaks. We're very shocked, disturbed and disappointed.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to Ambassador Parthasarathy and Mr. Serene. And what a pleasure to be back on India TV today. Look, it's a matter of two different perspectives. We were talking strictly from the viewpoint of international law and international norms and United Nations Charter. And when there is a struggle for right to self-determination, according to international law, the principle of erga omnes, it is incumbent upon the international community to support and help that struggle. So we were speaking in that context. So now you are interpreting the way you wanted to. And the Kashmiris have shown during the last 40, 50 years that no amount of use of force can suppress their will to secure their freedom. And I'm afraid they will continue doing that no matter what.
No, sir. What's the difference between you and Hafiz Saeed? Between you and Sayyid Salahuddin? Between you and Maulana, any of the Maulanas in Pakistan who run terror factories? They speak the same language now as you?
No. First of all, Hafiz Saeed and Abdul Basit, we are two Pakistanis and we are proud Pakistanis. Secondly, as I told you earlier, we have to look at this whole problem through the prism of international law. If you tell me, and if you can contest me that the struggle for the right to self-determination is not allowed under UN Charter, under international law, I will concede. But if you cannot prove that this struggle is something illegal, there is no international law ruling such struggles, then perhaps we have a point to discuss.
So Sushant Sareen, this is the language Pakistan spoke before 9/11. It had some salience in international circles where this was seen as a armed uprising against the Indian state, etc. Post 9/11, this whole language is out of the diplomatic realm. It's simply not acceptable. Why is it that Messrs. Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, Shahid Malik, Abdul Basit are picking up a trope that's long been forgotten and completely ignored now?
So, Rahul, a couple of things. Number one, I think your basic premise was wrong. When you said that these were eminently reasonable people, you have to see Mr. Basit's television programs to understand what kind of a rabid bigot he is when he talks about Ahmadis, when he talks about Hindus, when he talks about other religions, anybody other than Islam. So his holding a brief for Jihad or Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, who just because he has the right accent does not make him a very enlightened soul. And I could go in chapter and verse and relate to you everything he has done in the past while he was in India. Number one. Number two, if Mr. Basit is so convinced of his position and his country is so convinced of his position, why are they then succumbing to everything the FATF is asking them to do? Why don't they openly come out and say that this is our right, this is allowed under international law, and the FATF can go to hell, we will do what we have to do. If, Islam and everything else is so dear to them, why don't they come out and openly do this? And finally, if they are so convinced and they believe so strongly in supporting armed struggle and whatever else they want to call it, whatever other nice embellishments they want to give to terrorism, why is Mr. Basit's kids or Ashraf Jahangir's, whatever that fellow is, his kids or that other Shahid Malik's kids, why are they not involved in this? And why are the Pakistanis such cowards that they don't want to come in and do what they are professing that everybody should be doing, but they want the Kashmiris to die for their sake? So it is both hypocrisy as well as cowardice, hiding under the veneer
It's such a
of
glorious
international law,
struggle.
which nobody
Sushan Sareen
finds.
asks
and
you.
if international law is so nice and so dear to them, then they should fight the FATF.
Why didn't you make your children terrorists? Why didn't you send them to Kashmir for the cause of this armed struggle if this is Allah's call? Abdul Basit?
You know, again, I would not get personal here. The point I wanted to make was that Pakistan is against terrorism. There is no question about that. We tried to explain the position, the Jammu and Kashmir struggle, strictly in the context of international law. It was, now I do not want to repeat the entire history of the dispute, but the crux of the matter is...
Did you explain this position to FATF?
FATF knows about that Pakistan is against terrorism, we are against money laundering and so on and so forth. So FATF will decide about our status in the grey list when the time comes.
You are preaching armed struggle and supporting armed struggle. Why don't you defend this position in front of FATF?
We will, because it is not only for Pakistan, but for the entire international community to support this struggle, because that is allowed, not only allowed, it is asked.
No, forget the international community. Since you feel so strongly about it, international community is not saying Kashmir banega international. International community, you are saying Kashmir banega Pakistan. So you are supporting terrorism in Kashmir. Why don't you openly say it and proclaim it openly?
Then India, please, Mr. Sareen, then India once and for all should declare that India does not believe in UN Charter, India does not believe in UNGA General Assembly resolution, which was passed in 1974, which contained paragraphs and paragraphs on the right to self-determination and the armed struggle. So once India declares that it doesn't believe in UN Charter, its principles, its purposes, it doesn't believe in United Nations Security Council resolutions, then we can discuss as to what the status of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute is. But if you are saying openly, and you do not deny the importance of Jammu and Kashmir, that it needs to be resolved, you still say that Shimla Agreement is valid, you still say Lahore Declaration is valid. So if everything is valid, then how come you kind of misinterpreting our words? We never said
Mr.
the way
Partha
you are
Sarthina,
interpreting.
this is very dangerous. This is good in some way for India because the mask is off. Financial Action Task Force will look at these comments.
I must say I'm disappointed. I am disappointed by Basit, who spoke a different language when he was here in Delhi. Let us be very, very clear what this is all about. Much as Pakistan or Mr. Basit may talk about it, they were made to look stupid and isolated in the world when they went running to the UN Security Council and found there were no takers except a very reluctant China. Not even the Islamic countries came to their support. There, everybody said, discuss it bilaterally. So, diplomatically, that was a disaster. I think many of these people feel that was a disaster and are looking for a way out. If they go around this route, there are several things we can say. About, firstly, the amendment to the constitution, we've made it very clear that's an internal affair, and Pakistan has no business to talk about it. Gilgit-Baltistan was Shia majority when it became during independence. Today they've reduced the Shias to less than 50%. So they are involved in ethnic cleansing in Gilgit-Baltistan. Even the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is ruled by a Kashmir Council with bureaucrats sitting in Islamabad. There is no autonomy or anything. It is a colony of Islamabad ruled by a council of
where they are settling their soldiers.
Headed by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I think what they are worried is, now under 370 gone, we are going to get a Panchayati Raj based structure in Jammu and Kashmir, where every time they send a terrorist in, they are going to be in trouble. The other point I want to make it very, very clear to Basit and others. Don't forget Mr. Modi has changed brought a paradigm shift. 2016, we sent 11 lots of helicopter-borne forces across the line of control in what we call the surgical strike and struck. Second, the Air Force went in Balakot. Force, we will not allow them to use. They can call it jihad, they can call it anything. We will respond in the same measure as Mr. Modi is now.
Many times over.
That is, the paradigm has changed now in India. And for all that, when they went running to the Americans after Balakot, the Americans told them to cool off. Because they said...
Even today, the statement that's come from Donald Trump asks Pakistan to down the rhetoric.
Absolutely.
It's the statement is very clear. He's asking Pakistan to pipe down.
Not a single Islamic country supported them in the UN when they went running to the Security Council. And now, Mr. Modi goes to the United Arab Emirates to receive an award.
The highest civilian honor.
The highest civilian award.
Going to Bahrain and to the UAE.
Let us be very, very clear. They are into a diplomatic bind, and I would earnestly urge them. The way forward is to cool the rhetoric.
No, but it seems almost,
and talk.
First you had terrorists who were Fida'in, now the diplomatic corps has joined the Fida'in corps. That given the financial action task force and that deadline pending with the kind of statements that being made, the diplomats are now part of the Fida'in corps of Pakistan. Abdul Basit.
No, obviously we will go to the hilt to keep supporting the legitimate struggle of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And let me say one thing more, since I have this opportunity to be on this panel. After having worked in India and kind of, working as a diplomat for 36 years or so, I have come to this conclusion that this dispute, Jammu and Kashmir dispute, cannot be resolved between India and Pakistan bilaterally. We will have to have some kind of international mediation in order to resolve this issue. And this is my sincere assessment. Now, about the other matter you are trying to discuss, we never said anything to that effect. I will keep underscoring that according to UN Charter, according to international law, legitimate struggles are very much legitimate, and you cannot really blemish them with any other word. You may think that there is no support, international support to Pakistan. That is your perception. I would not contest it. But it's a question about right and wrong. Right at present may not have much international support, but we know, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir know very well, that they're on the right path. They want their azadi from India, and they will continue struggling for that. No matter how many people you kill there in occupied Kashmir, no matter how many atrocities you carry on, but people of Jammu and Kashmir are resolved to continue.
Sushant Sareen, when the veneer of diplomacy comes off and diplomats start talking the language of terrorists, what's the message that you think is coming out of Islamabad and Pakistan at this time? Why are they doing this in your view?
Listen, I kind of welcome this message because actually, that veneer which we seem to have imagined that Pakistani diplomats in India are actually diplomats and are not indulging in all sorts of nefarious activity, which I'm sure Mr. Parthanarthi knows better than I know, the kind of shenanigans they do in the mission out here, how they used to dispense money to the Hurriyat and others. A couple of them have even got PNG'd out here. So that is one part of it. The second part, if Mr. Basit is so keen and so this thing, he should please ask his sons or his whatever his children are or his grandchildren are to join this fight, rather than asking poor kids that cannon fodder which they get from the destitutes of Pakistan to go and blow themselves up and kill themselves. He should ask his own kids to participate if he feels so strongly about it. Number three, if who decides the legitimacy of a struggle, then how is it that if the Baloch are fighting for their independence, that is not a legitimate struggle? How is it if the Uyghurs are fighting for their independence and their rights? His Islam ends at the Khunjarab Pass. Beyond Khunjarab Pass, Mr. Basit forgets that he's a Muslim, because whatever the Chinese do, they put 1 million people in concentration camps, they violate their religious rights, they cut their beards, they feed pork to them. That Pakistan is all this fortress of Islam, the borders of the fortress of Islam end at the Khunjarab Pass. So I would encourage him to
respond to this, because when Imran Khan was asked about the Uyghurs of China, he said, oh, I don't know anything about them. He had not even heard about the problems, the concentration camp, 1 million people. You know, is that also part of the right to self-determination? Do they have human rights, High Commissioner?
Rahul, are we discussing Jammu and Kashmir or something else?
That's it.
If you want me to discuss other issues, I'm available, and we can perhaps discuss those
No, we are
issues.
discussing the principle,
the
principle of international law which you keep telling us, which you use to justify jihad.
We are talking about Jammu and Kashmir dispute strictly in the context of UN Security Council resolutions. Strictly what happened between Pakistan and India during the last 72 years.
Are those mandatory resolutions?
Bilateral agreements, and we are committed to resolving this issue. If you deny all those things, then it's okay. We can forget about the history, the last 72 years, and nothing happened, then we move on. But you know, the problem with my Indian friends is that they want to erase all that what happened during the last 70 years. You are calling this struggle as terrorism. We do not, agree with your interpretation. Where 700
because
to 800
Musharraf said before in the international community that he'll stop Pakistani soil from being used for terrorist activities.
Absolutely, he said January 6.
So this is a kind of narrative.
January 6, 2004.
Narrative.
Musharraf Vajpayee. Musharraf said territory under Pakistan's control will not be used against India. Period. That is an assurance from Musharraf. But let me be very, very clear. This selectivity is all very nice. You know, the Pakistan claims to be the fortress of Islam. Leave alone the Uyghurs. They have been playing all sorts of sectarian games within their own country. I mean, is the Shia safe in Pakistan?
Absolutely
I
not.
doubt. So who are they to talk about Muslims in India?
Sushant Sareen, you know, this bogey is now before the international community. Do you think this would make India's case easier before the Financial Action Task Force, Pakistan being moved from the grey list to the black list? Or do you think countries like China will once again come to their rescue? And that's possibly one of the reasons why even the veneer, the mask is now off, because they know that the people who kill the Uyghurs, who they don't speak about, who they pretend not to know anything about, they will once again come to their rescue.
No, so look, I don't think they're going to go into the blacklist because they need just 3 people to prevent that from happening. But I suspect they'll stay in the grey list because they haven't really delivered on FATF, number one. Number two, about Mr. Basit when he says you are interpreting it wrong. Look, I watch all the trash which comes on Pakistani television, including Mr. Basit's program, where incidentally he claims that the Mumbai attacks were not done by the Pakistanis, it was done by somebody else. He even has claimed that the parliament attack was not done by the people who were actually convicted for it, and one of them who was hanged for it. And this despite the fact that a former ISI chief and a minister in Musharraf's government on the floor of the Pakistani parliament said we should not be afraid of admitting that people who blew up the Indian parliament went from Pakistan. Yet Mr. Basit is in denial and he says that armed struggle is all very well. Well, then bring it on and have the courage of conviction, have the fortitude to stand up for what you claim you believe in. Don't give me this nonsense about international law and speak in terms of these concepts when you are not willing to stand up for them. Then please say that we are going to defy the FATF and we are going to do what we have to do. Then let us see. But otherwise it's all, so principle applies to Jammu and Kashmir, but principle does not apply to Uyghurs.
Out of time.
Does not apply
One
to
last
want to make a very quick
This
point.
is a country. This is a country.
The Pakistanis find it inconvenient.
This is a country which kept Osama bin Laden for over a decade in Pakistan's most crowded cantonment next to the Pakistan military establishment. And then they innocently proclaimed, we didn't know Osama was here. What sort of international credibility does Mr. Basit think his country has after that? I have nothing to add. All I'm willing to say is 14-1, nobody was willing to fight your cause at the UN Security Council in New York.
Okay, I'm going to leave it over there. You heard from Abdul Basit, one of the three men who's coming out in support of terrorism emanating from Pakistani soil, pushing for the right to back it. There will be consequences for this internationally. We'll track those consequences. Sushant Sareen, Mr. Parthasarathy, for joining us. Thank you very much for slipping into a...
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you will love to.